Welcome to Business Live. I'm Mark Croskery. In BL tonight, first up, we're going to talk about Jamaica's largest poultry producer. This is the best dressed chicken company, Jamaica Broilers Group, having a director resignation here or a change. That's Mr. Aubin Hill, well-known businessman, finance, connoisseur, has tendered his resignation as a director of JBG. That's a ticker symbol. It's effective September 24th, 2020, just the other day. He was also the chairman of the audit committee of the company. The press release or the release to the JSE website, that's jamstockx.com, goes on to say, no issues with the audit committee and so forth, standard release. Next up, we got Conglomerate here, large real estate holding company, a few private equity stakes that they've been building over the last couple of years in the marketplace. That's PanJam Investments, an advisory here about a shares transfer. So what it goes on to say is that a director, was issued with 11,069 shares or units on September 29th in lieu of director fees. So interesting move here. Not something that you see with all the companies on the stock exchange. It's something that we've been seeing PanJam Investment do over the last couple of quarters, or a year or two, in terms of whether it's with one or two directors or so forth, and they do come up with these advisories every so often. Now, with some heartbreaking news here, Palace Amusement Company, 1921, and it just shows you, how damaging the pandemic has been, COVID-19 has been, in terms of employment and job loss, in terms of the economy, really hurting shareholders, really hurting employees, just stakeholders as a whole in Jamaica and globally. We even saw where Walt Disney was, laying off, let's say, 28,000 workers. We haven't covered that on Business Live yet. We see where American Airlines is also maybe having some new layoffs or issues there, in October. But getting back to Palace Amusement here. So decisions being taken by the company. That's the board and the management to close effective September 30th. Just yesterday, Palace Cineplex as well as Palace, Multiplex. The release goes on to say and makes it very clear that this is due to COVID, the pandemic, but also, some of the other issues that have been down there in St. James, and also that sometimes just given curfew measures, other things, the pandemic, that they've had no attendance at all. So, and there's fixed costs to operate these theaters. So, heartbreaking to see, but it's a reality of what's happening. The second wave now, the pandemic continuing, and how it impacts, just businesses overall and companies. But, the curfew, we've seen a couple of, private sector persons go into it. The JMEA has spoken about it, also the chairman of Maybury. So it seems to be gathering some support here in terms of the curfew hours. We'll see where that goes. But, when we look at Palace Amusement now, another victim here, clearly of what's happening with COVID-19. We'll see what happens going forward as companies release more results on the JSE. Now, Paramount Trade in Jamaica, notice of their annual general meeting, their AGM coming up a little bit of ways, November 28th, 2020 at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel at 10 a.m. We look through the resolutions on BL. Everything looks normal, even the special resolution that calls for electronic means communication. Everything looks standard, that's good stuff. Now, in breaking news, last up, overseas markets, but it also appeals to us right here, in Jamaica. Sports investing continues to surge and equity partnership. So this is an interesting move here. Hyper Ice, in this case, Kansas City, well-known quarterback here. That's Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, who just did a blockbuster deal, $500 million US contract with his company, now doing an equity deal. Talk about where players now are becoming, private equity owners, minority owners. He also got a minority stake in the Kansas City Royals as a baseball team, as a player or an athlete. So Hyper Ice, a performance recovery company, and lots of, sports managers, sports coaches are now joining private equity firms, finance firms, as a lot of finance firms are now investing in sports team. So think about Jamaica, Premier League, all of our sports teams, cricket, this is something that could happen here once the structure's in place and in the future. I'm Mark Croskery, this is Business Live.